and thanks to Laura and the rest of the organizers for allowing us to have this panel discussion. I am going to let the panelists, and I arranged them in order of their picture so that I can quickly identify them, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I will then introduce myself, and I have a short presentation that I will run through, and then we can get on to questions.
Hi, my name is Adam Weiss. You can see my bio there. I work for GSI, and GSI is kind of unique in the ag space in that we're a equipment manufacturer that covers grain conditioning, storage, handling, seed, cleaning, treating, sorting, all the way into animal protein as well, making all the equipment for raising swine and poultry and commercial eggs as well. I'm responsible for product development, and so we do a lot of internal product development, partnering with entrepreneurs where it's appropriate to either buy their products or buy their companies. So I look forward to talking with you a little bit about that.
Hi, I'm Bruce Talon. I'm with Elanco Animal Health, which is a pharmaceutical company. We're a division of Eli Lilly and Company out in Indiana, global presence. My responsibility is external innovation, so I go out and seek technologies, do the search, do the evaluate to see if it fits into our pipeline needs. We cover both food animal products as well as companion animal products, and this is a little different than most of what we've heard today, but as technologies come out of universities and small companies, we're interested in seeing how they might fit into our pipeline. My own background, I'm a Ph.D. cell and molecular biologist, so I'm that tech geek who gets the first look at the technologies prior to putting some marketing around the potential lead.
So I'm Nick Nissing, prospecting lead for the Climate Corporation. Prospecting is kind of a unique word, but that's basically tech scouting. So looking for technology on the outside that could help accelerate our strategy or perhaps fill some gaps in our technology. And Climate is a company that's focused on using data and digital tools to help farmers make better decisions and increase profitability and sustainability. Anything that fits into the digital ag space would be something that Climate would be interested in. And Climate is a subsidiary of Monsanto. I've actually only been with Climate about 3 months, did some similar work for Monsanto, and I've been with Monsanto for about 11 years, but a little bit on both sides of the fence and very different companies as well.
Schroeder. I'm Director of Biotechnology at Archer Daniels Midland over in Decatur. My group works with, so we're basically an agricultural processing company. We turn wheat, corn, soybeans into value-added products. My group in particular works with our fermentation divisions, turning the glucose that we get from corn milling into value-added products for animal feed, human nutrition, industrial chemicals. I sort of wear two hats. I do technology scouting as well as manage a group of about 40 researchers in ADM research. So we're a company that does a little bit north of $60 billion in sales. So as you might imagine, our research group is pretty small, so we try to leverage that quite a bit with working with outside technology partners, small startups, larger companies, everything in between. This morning I was on a call with two different venture capital-backed companies. Yesterday I was on a call with one other. That's not unusual, so it maybe gives you a little bit of a flavor for how much we try to reach out to individual new companies with new technology and try to incorporate that into our work.
Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone. And my name is Vahid Aidun, and I'm the licensing leader at Dow AgroSciences. I also lead our external technologies team that evaluate technology that comes in from outside our organization. I've been with the company about 7 years. Before that, I worked at Cargill and spent some time at Syngenta. And my background is actually in corn breeding and genetics. Grew up in Canada. In fact, we had following on the last speaker, we had a call with the last speaker, Steve, talking about his technology. I'll give you a sense of how valuable this has been to me already. They mentioned on the call that there was another company that was involved in the research. Couldn't tell me who it was. I think I found out who it was. So, anyway, what I wanted to do today, because we get this a lot, I'm sure the panelists get it a lot. People send us technology, and we evaluate it, and we typically will get back with very limited information. Hey, this is not strategic to our business focus or our needs. And it really, because a lot of confidentiality issues around it, we don't provide a lot more information. We'd like to, but we don't. So what we'd like to do is just take a peek behind the curtain and have you get a sense for this is how we evaluate technology when it comes into our organization. So one of the important things to note is that the criteria that I'm going to share with you and go through is not criteria that only a large, well-funded, highly staffed organization is going to be able to meet. In fact, I was sitting with a gentleman in his living room, and he's a one-person company, very limited funding, and he hit every single one of the criteria that we're going to talk about, which led me to a seat on his couch in his living room in the middle of July, and he was sitting beside me over here, and his wife was over here. I had an iced tea, and I had a glorious homemade chocolate chip cookie, and on my lap, I had a wedding album of his granddaughters, and we went through every single picture in that wedding album. Because it was important to him, and it was important to his wife, and having that relationship was important, and they needed to trust a large organization isn't out to just take advantage of them. And but one guy, limited funding, limited resourcing, he hit every single one of these criteria, and that's why we did this agreement. So, a little bit of foreshadowing. This is, if you're pulling back the curtain a little bit, it's going to be a lot about making money. So, first thing we need to do is any technology, any opportunity that comes to us, we have to assess what is the market potential for that technology. And anytime you're looking at the market potential, whatever that market potential is, it has to far exceed the risk of bringing it to market, the time and the cost of bringing that technology to market. So that reward light bulb has to shine a lot brighter than the risk. We have to pay our shareholders back, and we have to share any market potential with the grower. As you had the grower panel up here, they need to benefit from it, and then all the participants along the chain have to benefit from it. So, what are some of the considerations for the market potential do we look at? One of them is how broad an acre or how broad an application of this technology is it, whether it's a seed technology or whether it's a crop protection. If it's a crop protection technology, can it be applied across a number of different crops, across a number of geographies? Can it be applied for several diseases, or is it more limited? If you're talking about crops, is it something that can be applied to soybean, where there's 80, 90 million acres in the U.S. and about the same in Brazil, or is this something that can only be applied to something like sunflower, where there's 1.5 million acres? So the opportunity size depends a lot on the breadth of the crop that you're dealing with. Is it a high value crop? A bag of corn seed can sell for between $200 and $300 a bag. If it's wheat technology, a lot of farmers save seed. They save the seed, they don't buy it every year, and they can save it and grow it every year. Corn farmers purchase that $200, $300 bag every single year. So obviously there's more value there. Does it fit within the existing commodity value chain? Is that whatever value that is going to be delivered, is it going to be delivered to the grower and then the grain simply goes into the commodity chain, or is that value generated someplace downstream? Does the consumer create a value? So the canola there is our high oleic canola. It is a fry oil, and in order to get that fry oil to the customer with that high oleic profile, it has to be segregated. It has to be identity preserved as seed to the grower, and the grower has to deliver it through transportation, through crushing, through refining, through transport to a food company. Production has to be completely separate outside the food or the commodity system in order to create value at the end customer. That's great, but it's expensive. And you have to recognize that every part of that value chain is going to be a cost. And you have to account for that at the final. And then more and more are public perception, public views. If you're looking at a GMO technology, for example, the industry average is about $150 million to bring a GMO and about 10 to 13 years to bring a GMO trait to market. I could tell you that that's an underestimate now. But in order to do that, if you brought it in a corn or soybean crop that's going to be fed to animals, that's more accepted by consumers. If that technology is going to be in wheat or rice, there isn't as much public perception or public acceptance for crops that are consumed directly. So as you can see here on a shredded wheat package, they put a non-GMO label on it when there are no GMO wheat varieties that are available. So there's a public perception issue that we have to address, and if direct crops that are used for food aren't accepted, we're not going to invest that $150 million in 13 years to develop it. All right, so those are some aspects of how we look at market potential. Now, how do we evaluate the risk? How do we evaluate what is this going to cost us in terms of time and money to bring to market? And one of the first things is we look at the stage of development. How close is this to market ready? Is there a lot of work that needs to get done? Is it a short amount of time? How much investment do we need to bring this technology to market? Is it short, or is it we have proof of concept in a model crop species? If it's proof of concept in a model crop species, obviously that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of money, and there's a lot of risk that it may not pan out. We also look at intellectual property. So intellectual property is critical for us, and we need to have not only relevant intellectual property for what we're actually going to market and sell, but we need to have some life left on the patent. So often companies will file very early, and we talked about 10 or 12, 13 years to get to market. By the time you get to market with something like that, you may not have much patent life on it. So developing a patent strategy early is important. The flip side of intellectual property is freedom to operate. So we want to have intellectual property protection, but in order to get to the market, we cannot be infringing someone else's intellectual property. If it's a very crowded space, like genetic engineering or gene editing technology, where there's a lot of patents, a lot of intellectual property, it may not be certain yet in terms of patent granted and who you even have to talk to. That provides uncertainty. It can take a lot of time. It can require a lot of money, and you may not be able to get licenses. You may have to try to design around technology, which again adds to the cost and the risk. And lastly, regulatory approvals. What sort of regulatory approvals do we need in order to commercialize a product? And often, especially on the crop protection part of our business, we've seen a lot of these chemicals or chemical families or chemical compounds, and we know that there are some regulatory hurdles that are just going to be too difficult to overcome. And so we will pass on the technology simply from the regulatory standpoint. On the seed side, again, when you're talking about a GMO technology, the regulatory hurdle of those is increasing. Our own Enlist product is being held up right now because of seeking regulatory approval in China. And that is for herbicide-tolerant technology. That's a 30-year-old technology. That's not a new agronomic trait or a new consumer trait. That's 30-year-old technology that's being held up. So regulatory approval is something that is really important for us. All right. What I wanted to do was run through a couple of examples. And these are real examples of technologies that were brought to me at an autumn meeting that I attended. And one meeting, I had both these technologies, and I wanted to run through them with you and then look at the criteria that we just talked about and evaluate them, give you a sense for this is how we look at technologies like this. So, first one, soybeans. Soybeans is largely a meal crop. It's for animal feed. A byproduct is oil. It's got about 19% oil. The oil is okay. It's not great, to be honest with you. It's got a kind of a beanie flavor to it that is detrimental in the Western world. People don't like that beanie flavor in the Western world. Peanut, on the other hand, is a tremendous oil crop. Now, the challenge with peanut is there's very few acres. It's difficult to grow. There's only a certain geography, but it's very high in oil content, and it's got this great nutty flavor. So, someone approached me and said, hey, we've identified a couple of genes in peanuts, and we think if we move these genes into soybeans, we can not only increase the oil content of soybeans and make soybean more of a high-value oil crop versus a meal crop, but we can also improve the flavor, get rid of that beanie flavor and add more of a warm, nutty flavor to the oil. All right, so we had a nut-flavored, high-oil soybean. The other opportunity that was brought to me was disease-resistant tobacco. There's about 350,000 acres of tobacco grown, and as you might expect, that number is going down every year. All right? So those were the two technologies that I had to evaluate. So, across the top, you see, all right, these are our criteria. This is how we like to look at things. Let's roll through these two examples. I think it'll be clear at the end. Nut-flavored high-oil soy, technology stage. The scientist had identified these genes and had proof of concept in this plant, Arabidopsis. And if you open up one of those pods that are sticking out, you'll find a seed. It's about the size of a grain of sand. And so he, based on increased oil content in Arabidopsis, said, hey man, this works, and we see this nice flavor profile. Going from that grain of sand to a soybean is very difficult. It's very risky. Most technologies that you see in Arabidopsis never translate into a commercial crop of soybeans. On the other hand, disease-resistant tobacco, they had identified the gene, they identified markers for that gene, and they filed patents on those, on the gene and the use of the markers. All right, so intellectual property. Filed on, hey, we got these genes and we put them into Arabidopsis. Feels pretty good. You feel pretty good about the fact that, hey, I got this patent filed on this technology. But in actual fact, the patent office is going to look at it as, well, you've demonstrated it in Arabidopsis. More than likely, the claims that you get are going to be to that plant, Arabidopsis. And later on, if you put these traits into soybean and it actually works, the patent office isn't going to grant you a patent. They're going to say, well, it was obvious because in this first patent application, you said it would probably work in soybeans. All right? So filing in Arabidopsis, getting in very early like that, isn't always the best patent strategy. From a disease-resistant tobacco standpoint, hey, we found this gene. We've then looked and found homologs in other crops. So yes, we found it in tobacco, but we also found the same or very similar gene in soybeans, in cotton, in canola, in sunflower. And so we've been able to file patents in those crops as well. Freedom to operate, anytime you're looking at genetic engineering, there's a minefield of intellectual property. And anytime you're looking at increased oil, there's more intellectual property that you need. Using marker-assisted breeding, there's anybody can use it. You have the license to the markers, you can do it. From a regulatory standpoint, this probably knocks a soybean opportunity completely out, because now you're looking at taking a gene from a highly allergenic crop like peanut and putting it into a broadacre crop like soybeans, and having to prove to people that you are not transferring an allergen is going to be very, very risky, very troublesome, and then you're going to have the litigation issue hanging over you. Disease-resistant tobacco, there really isn't any regulatory. So if we look at the market potential then, here we got this soybean. It sounded like a great idea. Your competition, on the other hand, though, is food companies, and food companies are simply taking commodity soybean oil, and they can add in some flavor profile traits or something to mask the beanie flavor, and they can compete with you very low cost. It's also having to be identity preserved. It's something that you have to identity preserve all the way through the value chain till you get to the end consumer. Super expensive. Disease-resistant tobacco, now I have this gene, I have these markers, I found them in different crops. I can not only use that in breeding programs for soybean, canola, cotton, sunflower, but I can deploy it all over the world, and I can license it out to any other crop that has a very similar profile. So, my advice to either startup or university researchers, if you have ideas, you have technology, it's often great to come and talk to us about it first. Talk to us about it early, and we can at least give you some direction in terms of, is this something that creates enough value? What are some of the risks associated with it? How would we suggest, you undertake a patent strategy with it? And we'll certainly sign a confidentiality agreement so that you're not putting yourself at any risk. Here's my guy on the one-person company and the technology. It was soybean technology, large market crop, yield traits. He filed for patent protection on it. He had freedom to operate with all the germplasm. There were certainly no regulatory issues. It was pretty close to commercialization, so it was a low-risk deal for us. All right, and here is a list of some of the technologies that us at Dow AgroSciences are most interested in hearing from folks about. All right? So what I want to do now is throw it over to the folks in the panel, and how Dow AgroSciences evaluate technology, how similar or dissimilar is that to folks in other industries? Let you take it away.
Sure, I'd like to comment on that. One thought I had as I was listening to Vahid is in all business, there's a risk-reward trade-off, and some companies may be less risk-averse. It sounded a little bit that way in that presentation, that you need to have all your ducks in a row. Other companies, myself included, are open to a little bit more risk. So what he did say about coming and talking about the technology and consulting and getting advice, I highly agree with and recommend. But you don't have to have the solution completely figured out. That's what industry experts are for, to help guide you along the way. And interestingly enough, when we were listening to the growers, they said essentially the same thing. Come talk to us. We're the farmers. We know what problems we're having, what solutions need to be provided. Likewise, a lot of the companies that may purchase your products or purchase your companies have that industry knowledge and can help guide you along the way. And don't be afraid to wait until you've got everything perfect before you come talk to us.
So from the animal health pharmaceutical perspective, it's exactly like what was described for Dow. You just have to change out the elements from seeds to drugs or proteins or what have you. We're interested in the same kinds of ideas, very early ideas, all the way up through something that's ready to go to market. Regulatory is a huge issue for us, as is protecting the intellectual property. Our time scale's not too dissimilar, 8, 10, 15-year time from ideation through to market. One of the things that we suffer with, and I'm not sure how it is on the ag side, is a high failure rate. We have failure across many reasons. Efficacy is one, safety is another. Whether in animal health, it could be safety to the animal itself, or it could be safety to the owner, the grower, or the consumer. So we have to take a look at that. Regulatory issues, and then of course market access type of issues. Again, I'll emphasize, let's talk about the technology. We'd be happy to put it in context, let you know how it lines up with the things that we're interested in, what's in scope, out of scope. We're dedicated to very quickly letting you know. And just because we say no doesn't mean that it's not a viable technology. But at least listen to some of our advice. We've had folks who believe in one regulatory path, but our regulators believe in something very different. We're inclined to believe the folks that we pay and who have brought products all the way through. We had one chap tell us, see you in the marketplace, which is great. Good luck. We're not sure it's going to follow that same regulatory path, but when from my perspective as the entry point, I try to keep it really simple. Right, three questions: does it work? Is it safe? And can you make it? Right. We really want to see able to conceptualize a path all the way through to the market. So we've got to have some sense of that it's going to be impacting the pathway that one thinks it's impacting, that it is safe for all those folks, and that there is a way to make it. And that's easy on the human pharma side, as we've all heard about, $89,000 a year drugs, $100,000 a year drugs. You can't do that in animal health. For when you want to dose a chicken, it's a penny a bird. That when we talk about can you make it, we also mean can you make it at a cost point that fits the market space that it's going into. We like platform type technologies where you can have a technology that will work in this indication, but we can also then replicate it across other indications or have product line extensions or what have you. So I'll leave it at that.
Sure. So I'll pick up with, I think there's a lot of similarities in the criteria that we use, but there are differences between companies as far as the life cycle and how long these things take to get to market. And again, I've got some background on Monsanto, but at Climate, it's very much more digitally focused. And we're looking at product cycles or launch cycles that are a year. or something in that neighborhood. And so I think knowing a lot about the company that you're pitching and what market it's going into and where it's going to fit with the strategy that the company has, I think will help you do a better job of pitching, as well as get the expectations right. So, if you're expecting to have something in the market in a year, if it's a biotech trait, that's not reasonable. On the other hand, if it's a digital, analysis technique, you shouldn't be thinking it's going to be 10 or 15 years, because that we can do much faster. And so one of the things I'd suggest is a lot of large companies do publish a lot of information about their R&D pipelines. And so doing a little bit of looking to understand what the company's working on, what their priorities are, go out and find a few investor decks and things like that. I know Climate just published a pipeline of, I think, 35 or so projects that we just put out there publicly. Hey, these are things we're working on. And that can help you understand if it's a good company to go talk to and whether or not your product has a fit. And maybe also help guide them in their thinking as to where it best fits for your technology.
Let's see, what can I add? So what Vahid had put up, I mean, it's really just right out of our playbook, right? Is it FTO? Is it protected sufficiently with IP? What's the value proposition? It all comes back down to money. We've kind of gone back and forth about timeline to commercialization. Risk aversion. I mean, we're a pretty big company. So the first day I interviewed at ADM, and this was pretty much the same story at Cargill too, the VP I ended up working for, he said, in a way, we don't do research here. And I said, oh, really? What do we do? And he said, we just commercialize technology. That's what we're good at. It sounds a little bit pejorative, but if I hear the word proof of concept, that scares me a little bit. When someone comes to me and says, oh, it's proof of concept, that tells me that there's probably a lot of research that still needs to be done before it could be commercialized. So kind of try and stay away from that. If that's what you're pitching, I might not be that interested in it, at least right now. A couple of years from now, it might be a completely different story, but at least right now, that might not be that compelling for me. Having said that, I mean, I don't turn away somebody who wants to talk to me and learn whether their technology has some value, right? I might tell you it doesn't have value to me right now, but come back in a couple of years. And I like to think that I try to provide some advice, right? There's a lot of venture-backed companies that I talk to and that I work with. And there's the old joke that goes around. How does it go? Ask for money, and you'll probably get advice. Ask for advice, you'll probably get money. And I think in a way that's sort of true, right? If you believe in your technology, if you believe in the value of it, you want to improve it. And so a lot of people come to me talking about, well, what can I do with this? Where can I go with it? And it's like, oh, that looks pretty interesting. I might be interested in this myself, right? So I think feedback is important. I don't think any of us would turn away an inventor, at least for a hearing, to learn about the technology. I'm not so sanguine about my own understanding of technology that I believe I know all of the great technologies that are out there. Or I can guarantee you there are ones that are out there right now that I should know about that I don't. And so if you have one of those, that's a value to me, and I'm interested in hearing about it.
I did want to. This is a great opportunity, by the way. If you got questions, you got technology you want to run past these characters. This is a great opportunity. The point was made, and I think it's a good one, about certain companies will be more willing to look at technologies at different stages, and a lot of that has to do with, quite frankly, how full is your R&D pipeline today? If your R&D pipeline in your company is pretty full and pretty robust, you're not as likely to look at technology that's far out. The other part is really culture. some companies just have a culture of, hey, we're home run hitters. We're going to stand up here. We're going to take some big swings. Yeah, we're going to miss. We're going to miss on a bunch of swings. But you know what? We're going to catch one. We're going to catch one, and we're going to hit it out. I would say Dow AgroSciences is more kind of like St. Louis Cardinals. We're going to sort of play small ball, and we're going to bat for average. We don't do a lot of home run swinging. But I'd be interested in some of your comments, and then we'll try to squeeze in a couple of questions.
I just wanted to make a couple comments. I guess my company's probably a little bit similar with Nick, but I will share a couple of our dirty secrets here. One is that almost any public company that you are interested in approaching is probably resource constrained. We don't have engineers sitting around twiddling their thumbs. We operate for a profit, so we're pretty slim. That usually means that the ideas that you've come up with, we may have thought of them, but we don't have the resources to execute on them. So I guess what I'm trying to say, another little secret is that don't necessarily feel like you have to have something that came from university research that is patented for it to be valuable in the marketplace, especially in the digital realm. If you have something that works and it's novel and it's not infringing on anyone else, it could be very valuable in the marketplace, and companies like mine are probably interested in it. Anyways, those are a couple little things that we look at.
So I guess I'd rather reflect towards the Boston Red Sox and maybe the 2004 Boston Red Sox, where you get the guys on base and then you try to bring them home with David Ortiz. I again support everything being said there. We try to be as flexible as possible how we engage on technologies, whether it's bringing in a molecule and doing an experiment that helps us de-risk it before we get the lawyers involved, before we start trying to do a full-blown licensing commercialization deal, or maybe do a little sponsored research to get that pivotal experiment that says, that proof of concept experiment that says, this looks like it's worth that investment. So we'll try to do those incremental de-risking steps rather than just put a large block of cash on the table and swing for the fences. So that's my, you get that walk and then you steal second base, and then you've got a pretty good chance of getting in. We call it the probability of technical success. By doing those incremental experiments, each time it passes that gate, that probability increases the likelihood that we'll be able to get something into the full development and then through to registration. So, yeah.
So I'm not sure I can keep up with the baseball analogies here, but so I think one of the things that's really helpful is we need some reason to believe that your approach is going to be successful, and it would be great if that was hard data. I know that's not always possible, but the best thing that you could bring to us would be some data that says, hey, we've demonstrated the concept and it works. In a lot of cases, that has to be preliminary for some reason. Maybe it's scale, or we don't have access to germplasm or something like that. But any data is better than no data, and especially if there are any easy experiments that could be done, you should probably do those before you bring it to us. If it's a big experiment that funding is unreasonable, you don't have access for some reason, we might help you generate that data. But if there are easy things that could be done before we have that conversation, that would certainly help move the conversation forward if you can bring us some kind of data or some other reason to believe.
Maybe I'll go back to the baseball analogy one last time. So I'll just make a plug for one thing that I'm not sure we maybe gave enough airtime to here. So being in research, I mean, we're trying to develop the next molecule that we're going to bring to the market, or the next technology that will end up in on a customer's buy list, right? We're also looking for tools and ways to be able to make our work more efficient, right? So the baseball analogy, I guess, is, we're not just looking for a way to be able to swing for the fences. We're looking for a new pitching machine or a new radar gun, right? That's as important. In a way, my job in research is as much to be a coach and a mentor to my team as anything else, right? And so I'm always looking, so they're in there, they're swinging away, continuing with the baseball analogy, they're swinging away, they're trying to come up with the new, latest technology. A big part of my job is to make their lives a little bit easier, right? And so I'm trying to come up with, find the technologies that will help facilitate their work. And sometimes that doesn't get enough airtime. I can kind of slice and dice my day about 50-50. I spend half of my time maybe trying to come up with the latest tools and the technology that will enable our work, as well as what's the next product that we want to make, right? So I'll make that plug. Keep that in mind. That is something that we are always interested in, and sometimes people don't think about it as much.
Laura, I think we only have a minute, but are there some
Any burning questions somebody wants to ask? I see one over here.
A quick question about confidentiality agreements. So how early is too early? Is there a consensus on that?
It's never too early.
So my rule of thumb is I like to have just one non-confi discussion with a technology partner, just so I can sort of set the boundary of what they feel is confidential and what's not. And I always feel like I can ask; they don't have to answer, right? And then moving into a confidentiality agreement is perfectly fine. But I sometimes feel like it just helps to delineate what the boundaries are of the inventor's belief of what they feel is confidential versus what they don't. Right?
We're the same, by the way. We like to have a non-confidential discussion first. One of the examples I'll give you is some of my R&D colleagues did not do it. They had a conversation. Turned out the folks came in and they were working on something exactly the same as what we were working on. So that created a conflict. So we'd like to have an idea of non-confidentially what is the area you're working on before. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just agree with that. I think the first conversation usually on a non-confidential basis, make sure we're at least in the right scope and that sort of thing. Maybe a non-confidential pitch deck or something like that, and then go for an NDA or CDA.
Do we have time for another one? Is there another burning question? That's it. Thank you very much. All right. Good.